Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. So on Twitter the other day, somebody wrote a post saying, if you just vote Democrat, the world will be a better place. I'm paraphrasing, but that's for all intents and purposes what the person was saying. The resistance. That's what they're talking about. The resistance. You need to put the resistance in office. That resistance, that MIC resistance, 17 of them have just agreed to assist Republicans in deregulating the banks. Deregulating the larger banks. 200 assets, well, up to $250 billion. Now, this was done under the fig leaf of helping community banks. $250 billion, $250 billion is not a community bank. That's the first point. Second, who are they representing? What aspect of their constituents is clamoring for this deregulation? 10 years ago, they tanked the economy. 10 years ago, it was just a decade ago. And already they're peeling away at Dodd-Frank. The 17 Democrats joining Republicans, essentially giving Republicans everything they want on their wish list, or a lot of the stuff they want on their wish list, undermining their previous president, who actually pushed through or signed Dodd-Frank into law. Who are they representing? That's what I'm getting at. If you're calling yourself the resistance, what are you resisting and when did you start? This doesn't look like the resistance to me. It looks like you're assisting somebody, and it looks like you are representing somebody, but it is not the people who you're trying to get to vote for you. You're representing your donors. And let's be honest, let's call it what it is. Just so we can clear on what the legislation is. This is the New Republic. What started off as an effort to relieve pressure on community banks and credit unions has morphed into a gift to the biggest banks in the country. Quite simply, if the bill passes, banks will get richer. The legislation raises the threshold that triggers increased oversight from the Federal Reserve from $50 billion in assets to $250 billion, freezing more than a dozen banks from stricter rules. It also exempts more banks from the Volcker Rule, which curbs the ability to make speculative bets with their own money and reduces the amount of capital they need to keep on hand. Now, what that means is, prior to this, if you had $50 billion on hand, if a bank had $50 billion on hand, that bank was under increased scrutiny by the Federal Reserve. They're raising that number to $250 billion. That is a massive amount of cash. That's $250 billion that they're raising that cap to, meaning the Federal Reserve, the stricter rules is not going to come into effect unless they have $250 billion assets. On top of that, when Countrywide went bust, Countrywide had less than $250 billion in assets, meaning the number they're raising it to would not have even prevented the last financial crash. Your resistance, ladies and gentlemen. Who is this going to help? Who are they representing? Again, I've heard people clamor for healthcare. I've heard people clamor for education. I've heard people clamor for some kind of education assistance, meaning cutting down the amount of debt that we have in regards to our school loans. I've heard all sorts of things that people clamor for and want in their society. High-speed rail, clean water, runs the gambit. Wall Street, deregulating Wall Street, has never been on that list. Has never been on that list. Now, you may have a few of these Democrats that believe they get some kind of political bump from this. I don't believe this has anything to do with the political bump. Their base is not going to be supportive of them supporting Wall Street in the way that they're supporting Wall Street or supporting the banks in this way. More likely than not, and the argument that I'm making here is the reason they're supporting this, they may use the fig leaf of, we want to show that we're working with Donald Trump and all this other stuff because we're running in states in which Donald Trump did well in. I would wager, though, this is more to do with their pockets being greased over the course of the last 10 years or 20 years, however long they've been in politics. Yes, they may like this idea of, we can get things done by working with Wall Street or working with Republicans in order to deregulate Wall Street. But is that really the thing that you want to get done? And is that really the thing that you want to walk around as a badge of honor? As a badge of honor with? I don't think it is. I don't think the majority of people looks at this and say, yeah, good. They were able to work with Wall Street. Good job. I don't care your political spectrum on this. I think if you're within the 90 percentile, and if the person is running as a Democrat or as an independent, I don't necessarily think they're on board with this thing of how can we support Wall Street and the banks? How can we do that? if they're doing this against the disincentive of being openly, of being seen openly doing this, if that makes sense. I don't take this as purely this thing of just a political thing of I'm working with Donald Trump and I'm working with Republicans in order to do this. I take it as they've been greased over the past 10, 20 years, and this is them paying back their investment. Just to make the point clear, because I said that poorly. This is Public Citizen. This is the bailout caucus. Democratic senators co-sponsoring Wall Street deregulation. Bennett, 3,900,000. Carper, Democrat from Delaware, $571,520. Coons, the most racist name in Congress, $984,000. Donnelly, Democrat from Indiana, $1,300,000. Heitkamp, North Dakota, $1,400,000. Jones, Alabama, $786,000. The embarrassing Tim Kaine, $2,300,000. Good job, Tim. You were extraordinarily well bought. King, $315,000. Joe Manchin, $690,000. You need to up your game, Joe. Tim Kaine beating you out. McCaskill, $1,700,000. And Peters, not to be outdone, $2,200,000. Do you think getting that much money from the financial sector would lubricate some votes? Do you think that might lubricate some votes? Do you think getting a huge amount of cash from banking industry or from Wall Street would protect Wall Street when Obama gets into the office and he puts a bunch of those people from Citigroup into his campaign, or allows Citigroup to choose the people who are going to be in his cabinet, in addition to protecting the banks? Do you believe that having all of this money sloshing about in Washington buys access and buys a certain degree of protection? The answer, of course, is yes. This is Klobeck. To make the point clear, let's hear from their donors' mouth themselves. I've continuously make the point, you have dollars or you have pitchforks. For the last 20, 30, 40 years, we have not had pitchforks. We've only had dollars. And it's gotten to the point now where these guys have been open and outspoken about the fact that the politicians are bought. Let's take a look at Klobeck. Let's hear from his own mouth.
Continue to say, down with the billionaires, we can't stand the rich. A lot of people want to be rich. So is it the right message that the Democrats are going with?
It's so effing wrong.
Whoa.
I've talked to Schumer. I've talked to Wyden. I've talked to Pelosi.
And said what?
And I said, if you use the term billion again, I'm done.
Why?
Because it's aspirational. I didn't start with anything. Just penalize everyone that's done well. We all want to do well. And we should be the party of doing well. We should be a party of business and leadership. And it is very, very disturbing when I hear the millionaire or billionaire word. And I've told them to stop it, knock it off. Because everyone wants to do really well. And this is the world of the aspirations.
Then are you worried that the Democratic Party is going too far to the left?
So much so, it drives me nuts. So much so, it would make me quit the party. And I've made it very clear, I'll cut your money off.
A plutocrat snarling in the camera with no neck, saying that if you mention class, if you have this conversation about class, if you deal with this thing of income inequality and inequities within the society itself, I will cut your money off. That is open bribery. Do you understand what I'm saying? The numbers that I'm showing you here is money that these politicians were getting from the financial services industry. If you're asking why would 17 Democrats sully themselves and support Wall Street in this way, yes, you could say from a fig leaf standpoint they want to associate themselves with Donald Trump because Donald Trump won that particular division. It is just as likely that these guys have been greased, their palms have been magnificently greased. This is massive amounts of cash. Now, this plutocrat is literally saying he called up Nancy Pelosi. He called up Chuck Schumer. He has their number. That money gives access. He has their number. And I said, shut up about this class stuff, or I will shut my wallet. I will no longer give you cash if you're talking to the public about the things that the public needs to talk about. Who's more important, that 1% or the rest of the public? I don't have Chuck Schumer's number. I don't have Nancy Pelosi's number. This plutocrat does. And certainly, he doesn't necessarily mind reaching out to him. And whatever you want to say about the guy, I don't think he's insane. Meaning, if he's saying, I will shut my wallet, why do you think he's saying, I will shut my wallet? He's saying because he knows that has some level of impact. If you guys want to continue to get bribed, if you want to continue to put money in your G-string and me pushing you out there in order to dance and shake for the audience, then you're going to shut up about this class stuff. And you're going to talk about anything else about how I got this much cash. And this is not just Democrats. This is both. This is not one or the other. Again, this is both. House Republicans. My donor told me to pass the tax bill or don't ever call me again. Chris Collins is saying the quiet part aloud. It's like, hey, you're not supposed to be saying that aloud. The House Republicans' tax overhaul has already made a lot of enemies. Let's see, where is it? Here we are. On my tax reform, my donors are basically saying, get it done or don't ever call me again. The Republican donor class, corporate and wealthy America, expects Republican lawmakers to pass the Republican tax bill. It's as simple as that. We know donor pressure is a big reason that Republicans kept trying to repeal Obamacare, but they still failed. Tax reform is their next and maybe last chance to deliver a big legislative victory, and Republicans know it. We haven't repealed Obamacare, so if we don't get tax reform done, we are in trouble, Senator Mike Lee said back in September. We might as well flip our tent and go home. So House Republicans aren't going to sweat the details. Their donors put them in the office to cut taxes. Well, guess what, dude? It's not just Republicans. It's also Democrats. If this rule applies to Republicans, meaning if Vox is going to come out and say this applies to Republicans, Chris Collins, he said this, I remember him saying this, pass the bill or don't ever call me again, you have another case of open bribery. It doesn't matter if this is in the best interest of the American public. I don't care. We are not on the same team. Pass that bill. Give me my tax breaks. I want my investment return. I've given you a magnificent amount of cash over the course of all these years. I want my money back. I want that returned in dividends. That's the Republican side. And on the Democratic side, you have the no-net guy, Klobuchar, coming out saying for all intents and purposes the same thing. Do this or you will not get cash. You don't necessarily have to look that deep into the reason why these guys are backing the Wall Street reform bill. They're backing it because they support it. They get cash in their pockets. They're returning that investment, beginning and end of it. Yes, there may be this aspect of it of, hey, see, I can work with the Republican Party on certain pieces of legislation. I just have a hard time believing that their base or the people in their state is clamoring for their politicians to be more obsequious to Wall Street. And I'll end it on this point. Part of the reason why people don't involve themselves in the political process as it is because they believe that it doesn't matter, that their angst, they're pushing for things to change. They're wanting social change and getting involved into the political process. They don't believe it matters. They believe that the votes that these people take are for all intents and purposes canned votes, motivated purely by the people who are putting money in their pockets. Now, that motivation is not pure and direct. I've said it before, you have dollars or you have pitchforks. But if the public believes that it doesn't matter what they do, then that public checks out of the process. Part of the reason they believe it doesn't matter what they do is because they see massive amounts of cash going into these people's pockets and these people parroting policies that is not in the interest of the American public. They can see billionaires get on TV telling politicians, shut up about this billionaire stuff. Shut up about this billionaire stuff. Stop talking about my wealth. Stop talking about my class. Talk about anything else other than that or I'll shut my wallet. Same thing on the Republican side. your party, your country, your political apparatus is ensconced in cash. And it is a difficult prospect. It's impossible for you to get a fair electoral process when this much cash is sloshing around and it tends to cater towards the people who are giving them that cash. So I'll leave it at that. Yes, they're passing this bill, and yeah, they are going to try to gut the regulations for the banking bill. And no, nobody else, none of their constituents, at least not the constituents who they're trying to get to vote for them, wants it. So you have a small donor class that wants it. Just be aware who these guys are representing when they're pushing this bill to unravel some of Dodd-Frank. So, all right, guys, if you enjoy the content, feel free to share, like, subscribe, and of course, there's always Patreon. Thanks, everyone.